Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Via every place in the world, huh?
That's right. That's right. I've been traveling for 3 days.
Were you destined to be an international humanitarian law, criminal law lawyer?
Not at all. I started out as started studying geology, worked in hotels till I was 21. Then I joined the police force, and then I started police prosecution, and then I was interested in prosecution, and then I was also interested in the idea of social justice, and that got me to think about a law degree, and I did a law degree. And then whilst I was doing my law degree, the Yugoslavia war broke out, and the Yugoslavia Tribunal started in 1993, and that coincided to finishing my law degree, and I'd worked as a defence criminal lawyer for a couple of years, and I made inquiries, and I headed over to The Hague and knocked on their door, and that's where it all began. That was in 1995.
So you first worked with what tribunal?
The Yugoslavia War Crimes Tribunal in '95.
And that was, the chief prosecutor at the time was Goldstone?
Richard Goldstone, yes. And then we had Louise Arbor after that, and then we had Carla Del Ponte following that.
And you've been there all that time?
Yeah, I was there from basically 3 months in '95, and then I started in '96 full time, and I was there till 2006, and then I moved to the Cambodia court.
Well, in the International Yugoslavia Tribunal, what did Goldstone and Arbor and Del Ponte basically feel their charge was? It's been difficult to get the main defendants just because they've been on the lam the whole time. And has that been a difficult thing to do, where you know the principal individuals you haven't been able to arrest except for Milosevic, which of course, were you part of the Milosevic trial?
I wasn't part of the trial, but I was part of the investigation and the pre-trial for that, yes.
Right. Was there a sense of frustration?
What, in the fact that he died during the trial?
Yeah, I gave you a couple of questions there. Let's just focus in on Milosevic for a second. That he obviously did die during after, I think, the prosecution rested, didn't they?
The Milosevic case was divided into 3 parts,
okay.
And after it finished one part of the case, that's when he died. No, the prosecution hadn't fully finished their case. Yeah.
On Milosevic, so the record isn't complete. In many senses, that's part of the difficulty. You have a lot of evidence on this guy, and you have no place to put it.
Yeah. I think there was a certain amount of evidence that was put on the public record, and I think people were frustrated. I think many people from the former Yugoslavia were very frustrated. They didn't see him brought to account for the allegations and a judgment be found, whatever the decision was. But that's the nature of life. I mean, we only live for a certain period of time, and he decided to defend himself, and he was a very good defence advocate for himself for 80% of the time, and that took a toll on his body. So I think the most important thing is that he was brought to trial, he was brought to account. The fact that he wasn't brought to that final account as to what the judgment would have been, that's unfortunate. But the important thing is that the process played out. He was arrested, and the evidence was starting to be heard.
The evidence that was never heard, what, if anything, can you do with that from a public dissemination perspective?
I mean, subject to security concerns of witnesses, the documents from the time, from the Serb regime and from the Bosnian Serb regime, they will be made available to the public. They've been made available to the public in a lot of ways through other cases, through the cases of Krajnik and other senior Bosnian Serb leaders. So much of that evidence would have been and was part of the evidence of the Milosevic case. Of course, there would have been some extra that would have related to him. So much of that has been made public through the trials of Milosevic's subordinates that carried out the orders of Milosevic. So there is a public notice of that evidence.
Did you know where Karadzic and Mladic were?
Not until they were arrested. The Yugoslavia Tribunal didn't know where they were. Over the years there were always rumours as to where they might be. But as you know, the Yugoslavia Tribunal didn't have its own police force, and it had to rely on the goodwill of other governments and the Serb government as well to hand these people over. I think the important thing is that they were handed over, and I think that's will allow for some closure for that tribunal. If either Karadzic, Mladic or Milosevic weren't arrested, I think people would view that a lot of work was still undone.
Mm-hmm. Are you keeping in touch with that tribunal?
Not necessarily on a day-to-day basis, but we have, because of the work at the Cambodia court, the extraordinary chambers and the courts of Cambodia, we're dealing with the same types of cases, the same large numbers of victims, and the same type of evidence that we would be looking for in relation to leadership evidence and how you can prove those types of cases. So there's a lot of commonality in what we do. So we keep in touch in terms of discussing ideas, approaches, strategies for prosecuting these types of cases. So we develop and continue to build on the lessons that other tribunals learn in prosecuting these types of cases.
Cambodia now. It hasn't gotten a lot of good press, simply because of I know Andrew expressed a great deal of frustration the way it's set up with the co-prosecutors, the initial 4 cases, and now you're into the second case right now, aren't you?
That's correct.
And
yeah.
there are 4 defendants?
In this case, there are 4 defendants. However, one of them has sort of early signs of dementia and Alzheimer's, and it'll be unlikely, I think, that she will continue on in this trial. So ultimately it will probably be, the case currently now is against 3 of the accused. That's 3 in the top leadership from the Khmer Rouge period.
Where are you? What's the status?
The case started, that case against Nguyen Chia, Yang Sari and Khieu Samphan, in that senior leadership group of the Communist Party of Kampuchea. That case started in December last year, and it's been running full-time ever since. We've had about 100 days of testimony. About 20 of those days would have been on the discussion of the admissibility of documents from that period. And on our projections now, we believe that this trial could finish in around August next year.
What are you going to do with trials 3 and 4?
At the moment, they are still under investigation. Those cases are the ones that are causing the greatest concern, I think, for the international community and for Cambodians. And that concern is that the Cambodian government have expressed their view that no extra people should be investigated above and beyond the first trial we had against Kang Guk U, whose name is Doik. He ran a torture and killing centre, and this current case that we're prosecuting now, the Prime Minister and other ministers have expressed their views that to continue with other investigations which are going on now, that would bring sort of instability to Cambodia. But as you know, I mean, the court is by nature, by its makeup, it's independent from government, and it's important that that independence is maintained. And so, because those cases have been launched, those initial investigative requests were sent by the prosecution to investigate these people. After a preliminary investigation, the investigative judges, the prosecutors, have a responsibility to continue the investigation of those cases. We have had 3 investigative judges that have come and gone in the 6 years. and we have a new one that will start up in September. His name is Mark Harmon. He's a seasoned prosecutor from the Yugoslavia War Crimes Tribunal, and certainly with his experience in prosecuting cases of this size and his integrity that goes with his career, he certainly would bring some of the best chances of success for those cases being investigated properly. But we still have a political issue of the government not being willing to actively support the cases. However, the Cambodian government signed the agreement with the UN that the investigative judge and the prosecutors would be independent. And as a consequence, that's the agreement that's been signed, and we have to follow that, and we'll see where those cases end up.
How are the economics working?
Funding is difficult for this court, particularly because it's done on a voluntary basis. The fees or the funds are not coming from the General Assembly general budget, but it's coming from particular United Nations members that are supporting the court. And for quite a while, we've only had enough funds to last for the 2 months beyond any particular date. But certainly as this main case is continuing, the one that's in trial at the moment against the 3 senior leaders, I think it's giving the funders a confidence that justice can be done for what occurred during the Khmer Rouge period, despite all the difficulties. The fact that the process is continuing and witnesses are coming forward, evidence has been submitted, and it's the trial process. It's a very robust trial process. We have defence teams from America, Holland and France who are litigating every point. It's the toughest case I've ever been involved in. I've never been involved in a case where every legal and factual point has been debated as much as it has been.
Right.
And so when people are looking at this case, they'll be saying, is it a case that will bring some proper legacy to Cambodia? Will it be a true sense of justice, or will it be a show trial? And I certainly of the view, the way that the case is playing out, despite the difficulties, people see it as a credible trial, albeit it's a tough slog.
As you look down the road, there's a common question for all prosecutors. This being an ad hoc tribunal, as are most, and the day is done, does this model work?
It's a good question. It's a complicated model, I think. Firstly, the thing that is different, perhaps the Yugoslavia Tribunal, Rwanda Tribunal, and even the International Criminal Court, that is based on the civil system, the French civil criminal system of justice, where it has an independent investigative judge, independent from the prosecutor and independent from the defence, where in those other institutions the prosecution and the investigation are fused. That creates a lot of responsibility for the investigative judge to act out the responsibilities of the prosecutor and the defence in making sure that their interests are met. It's a great burden on the investigative judge. I think that's a difficult one in such a big case.
Right.
And also the fact that it's a hybrid court. It has it's a mix between the United Nations and the Cambodian government, whose judiciary in recent years is not renowned for being very sophisticated in its application of the rule of law. It's a young democracy, and it's got a long way to go. So I think it's a good model in the sense that it ensures that the Cambodians themselves are involved in the process, and I think it's a good model in the sense that it can assist the Cambodian government, the Cambodian courts, in developing their rule of law, their fair trial procedures by actually participating in the process with the assistance of the United Nations. but it does have its complications, and I think it's very difficult to say that there is an exact recipe or a template for a particular set of crimes in a particular country as to how that court should be made up. I think it's very country specific, but certainly I think some aspects could be streamlined. But for the Cambodia situation, I think it's a reasonable model for the Cambodia situation.
From more of a broader question is, as Sierra Leone is winding down, the Taylor case is it. It'll go through the appeals and it's done. There are some mandates with both Yugoslavia and Rwanda is working its way out of business. And you've got maybe down to the last trial.
That's possible, but we still are pursuing these other investigations.
Right. So, but fundamentally, and then maybe if as we gather here 5 years from now, there may be just the International Criminal Court, ICC. Do you see this ever being, or not ever, that's bold, but likely to ever have this sort of ad hoc, forget Cambodia, forget models, but is this day come and gone, and issues like cost effectiveness?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, as you know, the International Criminal Court is based on this principle of complementarity. If the state where the crime's committed has got the ability and the willingness and the competency to prosecute, they should prosecute, and that's the principle on which the International Criminal Court is based. Now, and the International Criminal Court's one of its mandates is to encourage and to assist and enable countries to prosecute their own cases. So I think the Cambodia model, perhaps not in its exact form, but the idea of international assistance to local courts dealing with the crimes that have occurred in their country, I think really that very much is the way that justice should be meted out if these situations occur again. Now the problem, of course, is if the country cannot simply conduct these trials, and that's why we need the International Criminal Court. But I think there are great lessons to be learned from the Cambodia court, from Sierra Leone, as to how international assistance can combine with the local court officials to be able to prosecute their own cases, because then it's a justice that the people of that country can see, it's tangible, they can go to the court on any particular day, it's reported more frequently, and it's more tangible for the average person.
Which begs the question, as the current courts sort of work themselves out, there's going to be a void. Hoping against hope, the legacy of those courts is the domestic courts are stronger, better, able to take care of their own international criminals. During that interim, is there a role for the United Nations? Is there a role for institutions to teach, to help create that infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It can't be left to one court to deal with all large-scale crimes that occur around the world. It's not really cost-effective, and it's not as effective as it should be for the victim population in that country. And certainly, the role of the United Nations, or the role of the International Criminal Court, or the role of people that have been involved in these tribunals should be to assist in building the rule of law in these countries, and assisting them in prosecutions of even crimes that are of less of a large scale than what we're dealing with at the moment.
Life after Cambodia, what's it mean for Bill?
I don't know yet. I'll wait and see. It's a very full-on exercise being involved in these prosecutions, and it's very hard to look up and think about what next.
Right.
I'm just enjoying being a part of this particular process.
You've been in this for an extensive period of time. You're almost one of the senior people of this field that are still active, Bill. Does that strike you?
It doesn't strike me. Each case is different. When I was at the Yugoslavia Tribunal, you concentrate on one case and you move to another and you move to another. It's a real privilege as a legal practitioner involved in criminal law to be able to assist in conflict resolution or reconciliation in countries that have just completely been torn apart. And it's a great privilege to be involved in it. And then before you realise it, 17 years have passed, and that's that.
Amazing. When you look at the history of the Khmer Rouge regime, is there times when you just shrug your shoulders and maybe in disgust, but you're piling up the evidence saying, unbelievable how human nature can treat other human individuals?
It is unbelievable, particularly with the Khmer Rouge. That government became so paranoid that it was prepared to do anything in order to survive. And when I mean anything, the massive tortures and killings of a large amount of their population. It just makes me think that it's really important that as governments move forward, they need to take into account the views and opinions of everyone, because as soon as a government or individual start to say my way is the only way, then it becomes, you move down a fairly dangerous track.
And I must tell you that I'm so impressed with all the professionals that are in your field because of the dedication. You're doing it for, I hate to say the right reasons, but you're doing it not as lawyers who often get involved in the financial gain. I mean, you're really making a difference, and I applaud you. I mean, it's a tremendous commitment. It's a life path, and
well, we get paid reasonably, but by the same token, I think the people that have stayed in it for quite a while are quite determined and purposeful about trying to see some change. So it is a privilege to be involved in it.